Hey Rayleigh, and anybody else watching, and welcome back to another message from your father. So Judges 6 through 7 today. If you remember, we looked at 4 different judges yesterday. So that had us looking at Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, and Deborah. And then we also saw the Song of Deborah as well. Today we're going to shift gears a little bit and look at Gideon. We'll talk about why Gideon is important and why him being the least is very important. So we'll look at Gideon and then also the defeat of the Midianites. So this is Judges 6 and 7. So starting with chapter 6. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hand of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I snatched you from the power of Egypt and from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under an oak in Orpah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "But sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "But Lord," Gideon asked, "how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it really is you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon went in and prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast, putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot. He brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. With the tip of the staff that was in his hand, the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and bread. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was an angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Ah, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it, "The Lord is Peace." To this day it stands in Orpah of the Abiezrites. That same night the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd. The one is 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the men of the town, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. In the morning, when the men of the town got up, there was Baal's altar, demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it, cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." The men of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He must die because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, Are you going to plead Baal's case? Are you going to try to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. So that day they called Gideon Jerub-Baal, saying, Let Baal contend with him, because he has broken down Baal's altar. Now, all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet them. Gideon said to God, If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you have said. And that is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowlful of water. Then Gideon said to God, Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. This time, make the fleece dry and the ground covered with dew. That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry. All the ground was covered with dew. Chapter 7. Early in the morning, Jerub-Baal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moriah. The Lord said to Gideon, You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands. In order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her, announce now to the people, Anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. But the Lord said to Gideon, There are still too many of them. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you there. If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water, and there the Lord told him, Separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the other men go, each to his own place. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept 300, who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Now the valley of Midian lay below in the valley. During that night the Lord said to Gideon, Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Puruah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. So he and Puruah, his servant, went down to the outpost of the camp. The Midianites, Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. I had a dream, he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped God. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands. Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in their hands of all of them, with torches inside. Watch me, he told them. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. And when I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp, blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew their trumpets and smashed the jars, grasping the torches with their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, A sword for the Lord and for Gideon. While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah towards Zariah as far as the border of Abel Meholah near Tabath. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth-barah." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they took the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-barah. They also captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the hands of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon. The heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. So again, we see more of God using imperfect people. I was going to say broken, but what we really see from Gideon here is the weakness, right? He says, hey, my clan is the least of all, and I am the least of my clan, and yet you want to use me. And that's exactly what God does. And we see he has a massive army. So an army of at least 30,000, because he has 20,000 that leave because they're scared, and 10,000 remain. So he's got at least 30,000 men that God has led up behind him. And yet God says that's still too many. And he ends up taking them with 300 men. And yet it's not even really Gideon. So for all of Gideon's weakness, God was still stronger. And I think that's absolutely incredible, because that should be absolutely amazing to us to recognize that through our weakness, God is strong. So that's part of my prayer for you, Rayleigh, is that regardless of how weak or how feeble or how small you may feel, recognize it's actually in that weakness that God provides that strength. And that's a very, very good thing, because that fights against our pride, which is so completely necessary. And that fighting against pride is a lifelong thing. And it's going to look different. I mean, that looks worlds different than the world looks. The world looks at humility almost with a scoffing, a mockery. And yet that humility is incredibly important. Even in Gideon's time, we see that the Israelites have shifted so much that the fact that he tears down the altar of a foreign god, they're not praising that and saying that's a good thing. This altar has been destroyed. They want to kill him. So the Israelites have turned, God's people have turned so much so that it's that celebration of evil. And unfortunately, we're kind of in the same place now, where people celebrate evil and celebrate truly horrible things going on, and they don't celebrate the good. So what you do in celebrating and recognizing God as the first and foremost authority in life and in the entire world, that's going to look different. And it's going to be humbling. But that's a very, very good thing. That's exactly the place you want to be, as scary as that might be sometimes. So know that my prayer for you is that you recognize that and remember that God is weak while you are strong. Anyway, know that I am praying for you and I love you. I think you have mostly gone asleep. You're still tossing and turning, and then you've been petting blankets lately. It's almost like you're swimming. It's pretty great. Anyway, anyone else watching, know that I appreciate you so much as well, and I'll plan on seeing you tomorrow. Have a good one.